We take an oath that we'll never forget them, nor we will ever forget their families.
December of 2000, hours before Christmas Day, Irving police officer Aubrey Hawkins responded to a robbery. 5 of the Texas 7 shot Hawkins to death.
They knew what they were doing. They knew that there was a big chance for violence.
The Texas 7 became notorious.
It is a brotherhood.
So the thin blue line is riding to make sure their crime doesn't overshadow Officer Hawkins' sacrifice.
Because he's our brother, and we want the family to know that we're there.
Christmas Eve 2000 was a night that changed the Irving Police Department forever. Every police officer recognizes that he or she may be asked to make the ultimate sacrifice. Officer Aubrey Hawkins had no idea that as he finished dinner that night with his family and responded to a suspicious circumstance call, that would be asked of him. You see, that night changed the Irving Police Department forever. As Officer Hawkins was responding to what was seemingly an innocuous call on Christmas Eve at a sporting goods store, unbeknownst to him, a gang of escaped convicts was in the process of committing one of the most heinous aggravated robberies our city had ever experienced. As Officer Hawkins pulled into the parking lot, pulled around to the back to investigate, he was met with a barrage of gunfire and killed before he ever had an opportunity to understand what was happening. Over the next 6 weeks, our department grieved and was determined to catch, prosecute, and see convicted the 7 suspects who were responsible for his death. Now, some 20 years later, we still wait for justice for Aubrey, as 2 members of that gang remain on death row. But our hearts are still full of the love, of the respect, of the integrity with which he served our community and with which all police officers serve every day. As we move to the 20th anniversary, we just stop to remember and are thankful for the sacrifice that he and others like him have made throughout their careers.
We all remember where we were on December 24th, 2000, and heard the news about Aubrey Hawkins. Aubrey had only been with the Irving Police Department a short time, but he had a few years of experience before coming to our city. Aubrey was a soft-spoken, kind, gentle person who loved being part of the IPD family. Aubrey epitomized the dedication and service values of a police officer, yet he was taken away from us too soon. We're here 20 years later to honor the life of Aubrey Hawkins, who gave the hero's sacrifice to the citizens of Irving. I'm here today remembering our loss, but I'm also angry. I'm angry that 2 of the murderers are still alive after being given the death penalty. On Christmas Eve 20 years ago, these cowards ambushed and murdered one of our finest, then spent the next 20 years begging for a chance at life. They never gave that chance to Aubrey. That night we knelt for his family, and for the last 20 years, we've stood for Aubrey. We will always stand for Aubrey because he's a part of our legacy. His sacrifice shaped our department for decades to come. Aubrey was our peacemaker. He put the welfare of others before his own. He was that thin blue line protecting the lawful from the lawless, and he will be with us forever.
It's an honor to be able to share some of my memories of Aubrey today. Unfortunately, many of our current personnel never had an opportunity to work with him. Hopefully, I can give them just a little bit of insight into what he was like. I was still a relatively new officer on South B nights when Aubrey came to our shift. With lots of people, it takes a while before you really get to know them. But he was the kind of person you felt like you'd known for a long time immediately after meeting him. Aubrey was extremely humble. He was never one to brag about himself. And I don't recall ever seeing him in a bad mood. He was always happy and upbeat, and he loved being a police officer. We often get caught up in the exciting part of policing that's typically portrayed on TV and in the movies, forgetting that we are peace officers. But that's exactly what Aubrey was. He was a peacekeeper. That's why he wanted to do this job. He was a kind man who was always calm, even-tempered, and nice to everyone, regardless of how he was treated. One of my favorite memories of Aubrey took place on a rainy evening on the East Service Road of Loop 12. He'd made a traffic stop, and at some point during the stop, the driver he'd pulled over decided he was going to get out of the car and try to run away. I don't remember why he wanted to run, but he did. They were parked next to a mud-covered hill, and Aubrey keyed up on his radio, announced that he had a male running from him, and he took off after him. They both rolled and slipped and rolled down this muddy hill, and as I pulled up, Aubrey had already handcuffed the suspect and was walking him back to his patrol car. They were both covered from head to toe in mud, and Aubrey's boots, uniform, equipment, his belt, everything was just caked in mud. Most of us would have been mad about this, and I know I would have been. We probably would have had a few choice words for the suspect, making us chase him and getting us all covered in mud, but Aubrey was laughing about it. He wasn't upset at all. He just walked the suspect back to the vehicle, searched him, and carefully placed him in the back seat of his car, never chastising him for running or bragging about catching him, and that was just the kind of person Aubrey was. My daughter was born 2 weeks before Christmas Eve in December of 2000. Aubrey was the first person on the shift to call and check to see how we were doing and congratulate us. And again, that's the kind of person Aubrey was. That Christmas Eve was my first night back from spending time with my newborn daughter. Everyone was in a good mood and briefing that evening, and we were all expecting a quiet night. After all, short of the occasional holiday drunk driver or domestic violence call, even the worst of the worst don't do terrible things on Christmas Eve, right? After briefing, I stopped in the back parking lot to talk to Aubrey as he was loading up his patrol car, and I asked him if he wanted to meet up later and find an open place to eat some lunch or dinner. He told me that he was going to go meet with his family at a restaurant in town for an early dinner, but he'd catch up with me later. He was happy, and I could tell he was excited about meeting with his family. And that was the last memory I have of Aubrey. A few hours later, he responded to the Oshman's call. It's hard to believe. It's been 20 years since that night. Sometimes it doesn't seem like it was that long ago, and sometimes it seems much longer. Aubrey made the ultimate sacrifice that night, giving his own life, responding to a call to help others, doing what he was called to do, keep the peace and protect the community. For all of us who knew him, Christmas Eve will never be the same. Over time, the disbelief, sadness, anger over what happened that night have slowly faded. Now, most of this has been replaced by the good memories we have of him. Aubrey will always be missed, but as long as we share our memories like this, he will never be forgotten.
Aubrey Hawkins and I were hired around the same time in the spring of 2000. We were the bookends of the 830 badge series, with him having badge number 830 and me having badge number 839. Prior to coming to Irving, Aubrey had worked as a hospital officer and I'd worked for the city of Coppell. We started our field training together on the south side of Irving, working the day shift. Aubrey's FTO was Officer Ed Patterson, while mine was Officer Dana Morris. Officers Patterson and Morrison worked beats next to each other, which meant that upon occasion we would work calls together. He would either be the primary officer on a call or I would be, but we continuously backed each other up. Sometimes Aubrey was the primary officer, and Officer Patterson and Morris would allow us to just kind of work things through, since both of us had prior experience. Aubrey was a very unique officer who was always willing to go the extra mile for those he served. Although I only knew him a short 8 months, he was the kind of officer that he would have had a great reputation around the department that other officers aspired to be like. He truly cared about the job he was doing and the services he was providing for the citizens of the city of Irving and the state of Texas. Aubrey was so committed to customer service that I remember him speaking with the watch commander on a call one night that he had just taken. Lieutenant John Thorpe was in the office and was the watch commander assigned to the shift that Aubrey was on. Aubrey had just taken a welfare concern call for some children with CPS. He was extremely upset about the fact that the children were living basically in squabble and filthy conditions, and that he thought that there needed to be more that we could do for those kids. I truly believe that Aubrey would have taken the children out of there, but CPS said that as long as they have food, shelter, and clothing, there's not much they could do. Sanitary living conditions were not part of CPS's guidelines, and Aubrey just didn't think that was good enough. He wanted to go the extra mile. He wanted to serve that family, and he wanted to protect those children and give them an opportunity like others. Christmas 2000 turned out to be the worst Christmas of my life. Our department lost a friend, colleague, and the citizens of Texas lost a fine police officer. There was no time for Christmas cheer or celebration. Our hearts were heavy with loss, and our duty was now to pay honor to a fallen hero. It is often said that when a police officer is killed in the line of duty, that it's not a department that loses an officer, it's an entire nation. A truer statement could not be made. Standing guard at Aubrey's casket was very difficult, and trying to fight back the tears and maintain the vigil over him was not easy over the days leading up to his service. Chief Lowell Kennedy was insistent that Aubrey was not to be left alone until we finally laid him to rest. It was a task that every Honor Guard member took very seriously, and we were very proud to fulfill our duty to Aubrey and his family. It's hard to believe now that it has been 20 years since that day. Aubrey now patrols the golden highways of heaven and is in good company with other fallen officers who have paid the ultimate sacrifice. He is gone, but he will never be forgotten. May God continue to bless the men and women of this great department, and may he continue to be with the family of the fallen 3 officers. In valor there is hope.